Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Richard Swanson. I'm a member of the Science, Medicine, and Technology Committee. And as a physician, I'm particularly interested in our speaker and his information today on medicine, bills for your pills. First and foremost, to those who are joining us in person, welcome. And to those who are on Zoom, hope you'll enjoy it that way. Please take out your cell phones and make sure they're quieted and they don't distract the presentation. This is a reminder that you can enjoy the rest of our fall presentations by registering next Tuesday on the 18th. Registration period will be open for those courses that begin after November. I've got several one on those myself, so I'm looking forward to having as many people show up. Today, we are going to talk about medications. Medications, pills, they've been the bane of my existence, trying to help my patients find the cheapest pills possible, begging pharmacy or insurance companies. And we have with us Mr. Eduardo Garcia, who is with Spartan Nash. Eddie has been is a registered pharmacist. He went to the University of Houston Cougars, and he has been with Spartan Nash for what, 20 some years? 16 years. So he has quite a bit of experience. So we're going to hear more from him today about the medications and how your drug prices are determined. So, Mr. Garcia, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Glad everybody would come, made it out today. I'm surprised based on the title of the talk that you would even come to this thing, because I figured you know what you're paying, right? All right. You're going to find out you really don't. As Richard mentioned, I grew up in Texas. I worked for a company called Tom Thumb in Dallas for about 10 years. I went to Denver, worked for a Kroger banner that's called King Soopers. Worked for them for 6 years. My career moved up. They asked me to run a division of Kroger out in Memphis. So I moved to Memphis. I was there about another 10 years. And then I've been here at Spartan Nash for 16. So total, I've been a pharmacist for over 41 years. So I've seen everything. I was at a conference one time, and the speaker gets up and says, "Oh gosh, I'm so old. When I started, I had an electric typewriter." I turned to the person next to me. I said, "Electric? I had a manual typewriter when I started." So I've seen everything. We didn't even have computers when my first pharmacy I worked in. I was in 1981. Computers in pharmacy didn't show up to about 85. And it was the old Series 1 computer. It was the size of a refrigerator and did less than what my little laptop can do today. So just a vast career, not only the different locations I've been, but the things I've been able to experience. Hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit with you. I want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask it. I may not have all the answers, but I will get back to you on anything that I don't know. But so the talk today really is, how do we determine price, or how does anybody determine prescription prices? And there's just a few different ways. So you can pay cash, which means you're the only payer. So I buy a bottle of pills, you come and you buy them from me, I make a markup, I make a profit. I buy them for $8, I sell them for 10, I make $2. And that's old days, okay? Nothing's $10 anymore. You could have a discount card, and you probably get these in the mail frequently. They say, here's your card. These are come and buy your prescriptions, you'll get a discount off of it. And they're tied to some insurance company, a PBM, which you'll hear about a lot. The majority of my talk will be about pharmacy benefit managers or PBMs, and you'll find at the end of this, PBM is really a 4-letter word in my profession. But so that's about 6.5%. So really, it's really cash, but you come and we have to discount our prices. And the thing with those discount cards is there's a fee involved, and I'll get more into that later. Or maybe you have an insurance, you work for an employer that provides a prescription benefit. So you've got a copay card that you bring to the pharmacy, you pay your $10 or $20, and you go on. You don't really know what the exact cost of that prescription was, because your HR department is going to pay the rest of it. And then there's a multiple insurance plans that are out there, and they work with employers. The employer will buy a plan, and then they have different ways that you can pay for prescriptions within that group. And then there's Medicare, Medicaid, and a lot of the states that deal with Medicaid, they can have PBMs that they work with, or they can run the plan themselves. So again, cash, basically, we set in the pharmacy department, we set a usual and customary price. Now that's a legal term. It's basically anybody who walks in off the street, I have to charge them what my usual and customary price is. All right. So if you don't have insurance, I can't charge you more than I charge you. I can't charge, you're mean to me when you come to the pharmacy. I can't just bump it up, $2. Or I like you better, so I'm going to give you a discount. You can't do that. We have to sell it at that usual and customary price. And what that should do, it should provide the necessary profit that we need to sustain the business itself. And then everybody sets their price. So you want to be competitive. You don't want to be the highest, you don't want to be the lowest, but you want to be competitive with your competitors in the market. We set the price to where it at least pays us the more than what an insurance would pay us. So if you have insurance and you're going to pay me $12, then I want my usual and customary price to be above that, because in their contracts with the insurance companies, they will pay us our usual and customary or the contracted price, or whichever's least. So we'll always price it right above that. At least we try to in most cases. And when you well, I mentioned the competition. Everybody in every pharmacy is doing the same thing. You can take your copay card to one pharmacy or another. You're only going to pay your copay, and it's the same copay at most pharmacies. There's other situations I'll talk about where it's a little bit different, but for the most part, that's what it is. So it's a very competitive market. Cash payment, I didn't mention this before. It's 5% of all our transactions. 95% of the business that comes to us, that is being paid by a third party. So you don't pay for it, we don't pay for it. It's your insurance company or somebody else is paying for 95% of all the business. So when I set my price for cash, it really is minuscule when you think of the whole business. So that's just it. It's a requirement that we have, because some people don't have insurance, and so will have cash payment. So we have to set that price. Discount cards I mentioned earlier. I didn't mention that they're 6.5% of the business. So in total, the non-insurance claims that we have are about 11%. So about 88.5% are insurance.
The discount card, is that like GoodRx?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I was curious. That just comes and you get a discount. I mean, what's that all about?
It's the same process. Basically, the insurance companies or the PBMs negotiate with this GoodRx company, and they determine, well, it won't be as steep a discount as what you paid from an employer, but there's a discount on the price. So, gosh, I don't want to get too deeply in the weeds here, but the rates of a prescription are based on what the average wholesale price is. Okay, the average wholesale price of a drug is given to it, assigned to it by the manufacturer. So the manufacturer makes a product, looks at the marketplace and say, okay, that's $100 for my medication. And so everybody uses that. It's a fictitious price because it's just set by the manufacturer. It's not what it's sold for. They just say $100 is be competitive with another product in that same group of drugs. Then the pharmacy gets a discount off of that. And by discount, I mean we get paid less. So if it's $100, they'll say, well, we're going to subtract 15% of that. That's what the GoodRx does. And they'll say, okay, that brings your price down to this. Therefore, it's cheaper than your usual customary price, but you're taking a discount. Now, what's included in that is a fee that GoodRx collects, and they take it out of what we would get paid. So
it comes out of the pharmacy.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
So instead of paying that $10 at the pharmacy, you're going to pay $8. I in turn have to give them another $2 or whatever. And those fees can be huge. I mean, $12 is what some of them charge for that. And you never see it. You don't know it. But GoodRx is one of the worst ones as far as the fee goes. Okay, and I should preface this by saying this is my own opinion, not my company's opinion. Okay, I won't get in trouble for any of this, but they're one of the higher fees of cards. So you could get one, somebody else could bring a different one. There's what is the other one's advertised? Single care. They'll come in. My fee to them could be less. And so my preference is, hey, use this one instead of that. Your price is still going to be the same, but my fee is less. So that's where they get their discount from. It's really the pharmacy taking less money. And we do it because, I'd like to say because we're not very smart, but it's a competitive landscape. So because you can take that anywhere. And so we say, hey, we'll do it for you too. Because if I get you in my store, hopefully you're going to buy some groceries while you're there. Maybe you have other prescriptions you want to bring over. Yes, sir.
Eddie, and I'm staying on the same subject.
Yeah.
Mike here from me. Eddie, you mentioned you've been on the job for over 40 years. Is the Good RX and single care, is that a new phenomenon by your career? I mean,
It is.
a guy like you could say, hey, that goes back 5 years or so, or is this something that somebody came up with recently? Or-
No, it's something that they came up with recently, and I'll get into more of this later. But what happens is somebody finds their little niche, and the manufacturers they pay rebates to companies that own these discount cards, that own, to the PBMs. And what they found was they could aggregate all this business, take that and negotiate with the manufacturers that says, hey, if you want your product covered on this card, then you pay me a rebate. And those rebates are incredibly high. And so they found a way to take cash business, which prior to this wasn't tied to any type of third-party payer, created a third-party payer within the last 6-8 years. I forget the length of time because COVID just kind of took 2 years away from me. So it could have been longer, it could have been less, but it's like 6 or 7 years or so. This industry popped up, and I mean, all of a sudden it does as much as my plain cash business does. So, I mean, somebody just found a niche, and like I said, we're not very smart in pharmacy. We're very cutthroat. If you're going to give, it's like a gas station. You drop it down a penny, I'll drop it down a penny. You drop it down a dime, I'll drop it down a dime, and we all do the same thing. And so we just take our margins down. So it's like a race to zero is what it looks like sometimes. So any other questions? Those are good questions. All right. And then, like I said, everything else is on insurance. So almost 90% of all the prescriptions are paid for by a third-party payer, which that's part of the problem that I see in this industry, is that the customer that pays for it doesn't know how much these medications are. So the price can be raised by the manufacturer to whatever they want. And you only pay your $20. So if your insurance, your HR company pays $1,000 for a prescription, you never see that. And so that's what translated into now high deductible plans that companies are putting out there to share more of that cost with the individual. And then now you start to see it. And then now Big Pharma gets, excuse me, gets part of the blame that they deserve. But there's another player, those PBMs you'll find are to me, very instrumental in reducing our profits. I talked about cash. Okay, and then the discount cards, we talked about that. They don't negotiate that rate that they charge us. They just come up and say, hey, we're part of this network. So you have a Humana network, for example, and they just go to Humana and say, hey, I want to put together this card. Anybody can do this. Anybody can come up and say, hey, I want to do this. And the way that you grow that card business is you advertise. So that's why GoodRx is so popular, because they're on TV every 5 minutes. Single Care, they use Martin Sheen as their spokesman. And so, all of a sudden, well, if Martin Sheen does it, then I should use that. And it comes in the mail and it looks like it's something that somebody sent you for you to use. Very great. I mean, good marketing. They do a great job of that. And that's how they grow their business. But they're linked to a network that's tied to these PBMs that's created, and they do it for those rebates. Let's see here. Mentioned the fees and then the rebates. So, all right. The copay cards, these are cards where the manufacturer offers them to you because, they're patient assistance type cards. And that what they'll do is that they'll drop your copay. In the PBM world, when they're trying to help, and honestly, they do benefit the HR departments to help reduce costs. And that's what they were there for. They came out, you had an HR department that had to handle all these paper bills. So we as employees would go to the store, we'd buy a prescription, pay the full price. Back then it might've been $20. Then you take your receipt back to your employer and they reimburse you. That was the process. And HR departments, all of a sudden, the bigger the companies got, the more services they had to offer, and the harder it was for them to keep up with that. So this company called the Pharmacy Benefit Manager came in and said, hey, we'll do that for you. And so we'll manage your eligibility, because people come and go all the time. And sometimes you're paying for employees that haven't been with your company for 2 months if you have a paper process. And so that's where that business was created, to help some of the services that HR departments had needs for. So you manage the eligibility, you go and you negotiate with pharmacies, you create a network for the fees that they're going to get paid. And when you do that, you tend to lower the prices for the HR department. In that same negotiation, because they manage the formula, so what drugs are covered, what drugs aren't covered. You have customers sometimes that say, hey, the generic doesn't work for me. I really have to take the brand name. Or you know what, I'm allergic to some of the binders that are in the generic. So they created this third tier there's different tiers. So one tier is generics. And so you have a generic copay. One tier is brands. You have a brand copay. And then there's a third tier drugs. So that's kind of like the everything else. So you have to have the brand, because you can't take it. So you pay the third tier price. And that's where these copay cards come in handy, because your third tier price might be $200. You may pay a higher percentage of that. So the manufacturer will say, we don't want you to get off our medication. We want you to stay on it. We want to keep you as a customer for a long time. So we're going to give you a copay card, and it'll discount your copay up to whatever, up to $200, up to $25, up to $50. There's multiple ones that are out there, and anybody can use those. So they will help you with that. It's really a nice thing that they do on one hand. On the other hand, I'm thinking, if you can do that, why don't you just drop the price? But they don't. Lipitor went generic, I don't know, what was it, 10 years ago? And remember, COVID just erased something. So my times are off, that's why. That was $1 billion drug. From one day to the next, it went generic. They lost 90% of their sales, 90% of that business. So Pfizer had to tell their shareholders that, okay, this is what's going to happen. And of the dollars, yes, yeah. No, I'm sorry. The volume moved. The volume moved to the generic companies. Now, what they did prior to that is they bought a generic company, Greenstone. So the volume was there, but it was their own company, but the sales went down. The same pill. They buy the Greenstone one day to the next, it's 10% of what the cost was. So you wonder, well, why don't you just stick to the brand name medication? You've got all that goodwill in that name. Everybody knew Lipitor, everybody liked it. And now you've got 12 different manufacturers making it. And you could have avoided that had you just dropped the price. I mean, you're going to lose 90% anyway, so why not? I don't understand that. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but that's what happens. And so instead of having you leave their brand name and go somewhere else, they'll give you these copay cards. So when they're getting ready to go generic, you'll start seeing a lot of these copay cards out there. A drug has about 17 years from the day it was invented of patent protection. Once those 17 years are up, anybody can make it. And that's how the generics were developed. So let's see. Any questions on the copay card? You may see them advertised on TV. Yes, ma'am. No.
You don't have to pay for the.
No, we basically get paid what we would charge, and the discount, because they're just affecting the copay. They don't affect what the insurance company is going to pay me for the prescription. I know it's if by the end of this day your mind isn't blown, I'll be surprised. All right, now let's get into the PBM discussion. And the PBM, I want to focus on the commercial side, so not the Medicare or Medicaid, because that's a whole nother animal. But as I mentioned, the companies are trying to reduce their costs of health all the time, of healthcare. It's one of the things, and I don't know exactly when it started, that employers started providing insurance instead of you buying it on your own, but years ago it started. It was a way to attract employees, I guess. And so they did that. And when you're sitting there with all the work of maintaining the eligibility, managing all the payments and stuff, it made sense that a company would come in and say, hey, we'll do this for you. We've got all these computers, you can have whatever insurance you want, and we'll deal with each of them. They have And Dave, you might want to help me with the name of the computers. The one, it translates now the adjudication is the process, just like a credit card thing, but there's the computer cell, there's some kind of computers that they can receive the data and then they can send it to somebody else. They translate it to the fields the way they want to see them. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, so they came up with that and they said, one company can deal with multiple employers, multiple insurance companies, and the way that the fields come in for the document that one insurance company needs versus another can be completely different. And they'll take it, they'll translate it and do it. And so the HR departments didn't have to worry with it. So they didn't mind paying for that. So these are the things that they do. If they do eligibility, they do the formulary. So which drugs are going to be covered, which drugs aren't. And they'll come to the company and they'll say, you know what, if you force everybody to take a generic when there's one available, it'll save you X number of dollars. HR departments will look at that and they'll weigh, okay, the complaints versus the dollars they're going to save, which makes more sense, and they'll make a decision on that. Yes, sir.
About the formulary in particular.
Yeah.
When a company, if I'm running a large company and I'm negotiating with these folks, and do the formularies dramatically different from company to company? I mean, how specific, or do they say, well, here's formulary A, B, C, pick one? I mean, how specific do they get?
They can be very different, but the vast majority of companies use one that's kind of similar. Companies have to make a decision. Do I cover birth control or don't I? Do I pay for some of these investigational type drugs, or do I put more of that on the employee? You know, do I pay for things like you know, over the counter items? Some do, some don't. There's a formulary that includes what's called step therapy, which means that your doctor's going to write an antibiotic for you. And in order for you to get the antibiotic, sometimes the doctor wants to write. You say, hey, I want this broad spectrum drug. This is the one I want to hit you with. It's probably the most expensive one on the market, brand new, just came out. And the insurance says, no, you can't take that one until you fail on penicillin first. If you fail on penicillin, then we'll let you take the other one. But if penicillin works, then you're good, because it's a broad spectrum. It might cover it, it might not. And so that step there, that's part of it. Well, so you can see that instead of paying for the most expensive one all the time, sometimes they'll pay for the cheaper one and get away with that, and the patients still receive the benefit they need. Yes, sir.
Hey, listen, I'm not sure it's inappropriate to the class, so tell me.
Sorry.
I had an inpatient situation at Holland Hospital, and when I got ready to check out, they said, well, you were taking products A and B and C, and for that, there is absolutely no discounting whatsoever, and you will pay in full. What was your term? The customary pricing?
Usual customary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the retail customary price. And apparently that is, Medicare has the same policy that it's the patient's problem, because I forced Holland Hospital to give me pills A, B, and C by being in the hospital.
Yeah.
Any comment on that?
I mean, it's the formulary management process that's what goes under, and it will vary from insurance to insurance. And I'm talking about the commercial piece now. So that really is again, the majority of them are going to be pretty similar. Everybody's going to cover birth control. Everybody's going to pay for some of these expensive medications to some extent. The copay may be higher for some, or they may do. I mean, some may not require generics. Pfizer, for example, they make brand name drugs. They don't want their employees to take generics, so they allow them to take brands. So there's different things that they can come up with. Yes.
I was just going to comment about that situation. I mean, what happens is the hospitals have different contracts with the pharma companies than the PBMs do. So
yeah,
they may be,
that's true.
They may be incentivized to give you a brand name drug when you're in the hospital. And then if you're discharged on that drug, but your formulary doesn't cover it, then you're kind of caught in the middle. So that's one of the issues, is that there are different contractual arrangements between hospitals that are dispensing drugs to inpatient stays on a DRG, a diagnostic related group, where all of your drugs are included.
That's true.
Versus what happens when you get out of the hospital with your coverage.
The issue here was that I filled out the forms and said, I'm taking pills A, B, and C for over the last year. And then I had to be dispensed 3 of them. So it'd be 9 pills total. And I think the bill was $140 for the 9 pills.
So,
And it's not that high on the outside, but it's Holland Hospital's policy.
now, hospitals, not to get off the subject too much, but the hospitals train their physicians to write every drug generically because their contracts can change, whether it's the wholesaler or something that it can change. So you don't know from year to year what brand they're actually going to have. And so that can change. But to your point, there are restrictions. Okay, PBMs is another thing that just burns me up. They own mail order pharmacies. Okay. Now, on one hand, you think, well, why is that a problem? Well, we contract with them and they say, I've got these 5,000 people that work for this company. You can fill their prescriptions. And yet then they market to those 5,000 people and say, you know what, if you go to mail order, which I own and I fill and I make money off of, then you only have to pay 2 copays for 3 months worth of prescriptions. So employees think, hey, why not? We'll do that. Well, what happened is there's only about 25% of the people that are willing to get their prescriptions through the mail. And so they weren't able to grow that to the extent that they wanted to. So then they come to us and say, okay, if you'll give 90 days worth of prescriptions, we'll only charge them 2 copays. And because you're using only 1 bottle instead of 3, 1 label instead of 3, 1 bag instead of 3 bags, it's costing you less to fill that. So we're going to pay you less. So all the 90-day prescriptions that we take, and like I said, we're not very smart. We say, sure, we'll do it. That's what ends up happening. So they try to push you to 90-day prescriptions. So that's it. I don't know if you, I'm sure what kind of communication you might have seen in your health packet that you get, but that's really what they want you to do on maintenance drugs, not on every drug, but on maintenance drugs. And so, like I said, as pharmacies, we said, yeah, sure. So I've got this business competing with my business that gives me the price and tells me what they're going to pay me. You can't negotiate with PBMs. You can say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to accept that rate. Fine, don't fill the prescriptions. We'll send them to Walgreens. We'll send them to Meijer. So, like I said, we're not very smart. I'll leave it at that. If this was another group, I would use different words. Specialty pharmacy. These are drugs that require extended counseling. It's not something we're really prepared to do. So there are specific pharmacies that do that. These are drugs that cost, $10,000, $12,000 a month. And so we have a partner that we use to do that, but we don't do that directly. But a lot of specialty pharmacies they're either owned or they have a contractual relationship with the PBM, again, which is a competitive situation. And then the rebates. You'll be shocked, I think, to hear that they force all the manufacturers. If they want to be on the formulary, they don't want to be excluded from these formularies. They tell them, well, fine, you got to pay me a rebate. The amount that they charge is between 40 and 70%. So we get mad at Big Pharma because their prices are so darn high. They have to pay 40% of that off the top, at least, to the PBM. Now, what the PBM historically has done with that money is they share it. They give a part, probably the majority, back to the employer, but they do nothing for it. Again, those are things that I don't understand why they do it. I mean, a manufacturer of a brand name item technically has the monopoly on that item. And yet they will pay that rebate not to be left off that formulary because then they would find some other way to use the medication. And so when you think of that and you say, okay, these PBM companies, and I'll go ahead and name one of them because it's the largest, CVS. Okay, CVS has the largest PBM that's out there. They own pharmacies that I compete with. They set my prices by the contracts that I have to sign with them. They have a mail order relationship, and I'm supposed to be able to compete with them, on a level playing field. It's just not. And yet they're able to go to manufacturers and get all these rebates and give portion back to the employer. Because remember, the employer is trying to reduce their cost of health. And so they'll work with then there's another middleman called the TPA that works with multiple PBMs. And I think I'm getting ahead of my slides here, but I'll just what the heck? They will work with them, and sometimes the PBM actually employs them. And so they'll go to, I'll just pick a company here now, Herman Miller. They'll go to Herman Miller and say, hey, you know what? We're going to be able to save you money. We're going to generate this many rebates with the number of prescriptions that your members fill. And we're going to get you a formulary that everybody will be happy with. And here's what it's going to cost you. And Herman Miller looks at that and says, wow, I'm going to save $2 million. They do it. Now, do they care that the PBM just took $1 million out of the potential that they could? They probably care, but they don't know. There is zero transparency in this industry. So state legislature, and I put here that including Michigan, actually Michigan passed an oversight bill. So they have the ability now to oversee what the PBMs are doing, because it's really unfair business practice, in my opinion. Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to comment about rebates. One of the other issues that depending on the health plan that you're in, that it's really important to think about is that particularly people in a high deductible health plan, if the plan sponsor, whether that's your employer or you're buying it off the exchange or even in a Medicare, well, I don't think they can do that in Medicare Advantage, but if the rebates are not built in to the price of the drug, then you as the consumer have to pay the full price of the drug and you don't get any benefit of the rebate.
Exactly.
So that's another really significant issue with rebates. Now, some plan sponsors will work into their contract that the rebates have to be folded back into the price so the consumers get some benefit of that. But that doesn't happen most of the time for the reason that you just indicated that, a lot of employers just don't know, right?
Yeah.
And they don't understand how that's, going to impact. But that's something for us as consumers to be aware of.
Okay. And again, I'm jumping all over this. I apologize. I'm not going in the order I was planning on, but and you mentioned Medicare. So Medicare Part D pays for prescriptions. So I'll bring it up just because you brought that up. The PBMs negotiate with the government. You have to have at least 100,000 lives that you're covering before you can be under that network. Well, they do. They estimate what the rebates are going to be. And these people are smart. These are the same people that work and determine how long you're going to live and how much to charge you for life insurance. Okay, they don't go broke doing that. So they figured a lot of things out. They know exactly how many people are not going to take their medication. I mean, they don't know who exactly, but they know the percentages. So they know exactly where things are going to fall. And if they happen to underestimate by, I think it's 5%, they're able to keep that 5%. If they go over, if they underestimate by more, then they have to give that to the government on the Medicare Part D plan. So it's gosh, and I apologize, I'm really getting off track here, but go ahead.
In your Herman Miller scenario, if I was an employee of Herman Miller, would the fact that they're using a PBM be a good thing for me? Would that help to keep my monthly charges down over a long period of time? So is there value to me as a consumer employer?
Yeah, no, great question. There is value that they use the PBM. Which PBM they use might determine how much value you get, because remember, they have to find a way to afford that health plan. And one of the ways they do, I mean, they could hire a bunch of people and do all the claims management themselves or the formulary management, and they could pay for that separately and then negotiate their own rebates to try to get the manufacturer rebate. They could do all that. It cost them a lot more money. So there definitely is value, but there are PBMs out there, unlike the big three that I point to a lot of times, that will be very transparent. They will take the rebate check that they receive from the manufacturer and hand it over to the employer. These other big three will not. They will give you what they tell you. And then not all the money that they get from the manufacturer is called a rebate. They have market share agreements with manufacturers. So they say, hey, if I agree, if I arrange my plan so that more of your product gets sold than your competitor, then I want a part of the cut. That's what the PBM will tell the manufacturer, and they pay it. The employer never sees that money. A PBM can set the plan up to where I pay them $20 for a prescription, and they only give the employer, and they charge the employer $22 or some percentage higher. That's called spread pricing. So that's profit to them. Sometimes that's made clear to the employer. Many times it's not. I will tell you, it wasn't with our company. I started seeing some things that I didn't understand. And so I went to our HR department and I said, let's try to figure this out, because you're saying your cost was this for these prescriptions. I'm saying this is what I was paid, and there's a difference. So we went back to our insurance company, and sure enough, they had spread pricing involved. And we said, we own pharmacies. We have our people go to our own pharmacies. There should be no spread pricing. And so they took it out. In that same conversation, I told it was the insurance company, not the PBM, because insurance companies partner with different PBMs, different places. An example, Blue Cross Blue Shield uses Optum, and that's who we use today. That just switched. They used to use Express Scripts. But I went to that insurance company and I said, look, our computers these days in pharmacies are pretty smart. You know, it's not like the old days where, you know, it was the old Pentium computers. Now these suckers can, I mean, they can send somebody to the moon probably with the capability it has. Dave, you probably say that's wrong, but I could manage a formulary. The one thing I can't do is manage eligibility. There's a lot of work that would have to be done there, but I can do the formulary. I can run reports. You want to know, because that's really what they want. The HR company, HR department wants the reports of what people are taking, what they're not. How can I, either help people, or how can I, help reduce the cost of the plan? And my computer can do all that. So if I take all that work away from you, how much would we save on a per member per month, basis? And they looked at me and go, no, your cost will go up. So that tells you there's a relationship between the PBM and them that's financial in nature. And so they benefit from that. And I don't mind people making a profit. I really don't. I mean, my company's in there, my department tries to make a profit. You'd look at my P&L and you'd wonder if I was going to be a nonprofit company, but we do try. But anyway, and I probably got way too much into the weeds there, but what makes benefits tougher is that you cover the families as well. So, and then it's adopted children, it's, different families, all of a sudden you get divorced or they're remarried, or so there's a lot of complications that happen. And so having the PBM, there's definitely benefit to the company to have that. What haven't I covered on this slide here? Yeah, Me Too drugs are, what happens is you have several manufacturers that, like atorvastatin, as I mentioned, Lipitor, when it went generic, we had, I think, 12 or 13 companies that came out the very next day with their products available to purchase at 10% of the cost. And then over time, manufacturers that didn't end up getting the share of market that they needed to maintain, they drop off. So you'll have a lot of companies. All of a sudden, you'll have 5 manufacturers left. And so another company will come and say, you know what? I think there's room for me to pick up some margin here and pick up some of that market. And so they'll jump in. And so those are drugs we call them Me Too, because it's okay, another atorvastatin. That's what that's intended to mean. I mentioned step therapy. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see.
Eddie, I have a question on step therapy.
Yes, sir.
The the insurance companies oftentimes will say, in my business, rheumatology, you've got to take a non-steroidal before you get to methotrexate.
Yep.
We know from the literature that isn't going to work, but yet you can't argue with them. I can remember back when methotrexate was first coming out. I was doing it with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and their physician was a retired OBGYN. He didn't know a damn bit about methotrexate, yet he determined the policy for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yep.
And the step therapy. You had patients who were not getting appropriate literature-backed therapies. What can we do about those kind of things? Because the insurance companies will do everything they can to give you the cheapest drug, whether it works or not.
I wish I knew what to do, because believe me, I've told people when I retire, which won't be too long from now, I'm 64 today, so I figured I'll go a couple more years. My goal is to be a disruptor to this PBM business, and step therapy. I mean, if you look at the, and this is another thing that some PBMs will fund for the insurance companies is the P&T committees, which has to do with the pharmacology or therapeutics. And so they're going to say, okay, we don't want people to continually take a brand new drug, because before you know it, then the microbe that they're trying to destroy becomes resistant to it. And so they do want you to say, no, if penicillin will work, use penicillin. You know, don't jump to that new antibiotic. So it has some credibility to it, but the majority of the reason is financial, and everything that they do has to be around pharmacies. And if you look at their the calls they have with analysts, it's amazing. You know, the pharmacies, you know, may not be making much money, but the company as a whole is making a ton of money. Years ago, I wish I had known I would have invested much better than I do today. I will tell you that years ago, this is back in probably the late 80s, Rite Aid bought a PBM called PCS. PCS is now Caremark. Okay, they've gone through a couple of different iterations of the same company, and the FTC came in and said, "Wait a minute, you can't have all that information. You know, you don't have. There's not enough firewalls in place here that you can't use this patient's medication and send them to, you know, your own pharmacy by some hook or crook or whatever they do." Maybe that's the right saying. My first language was Spanish, so I get confused sometimes. But so you go out there and you say, you know, you can't have that. So the FTC said no. They had to reverse the sale. They had to spin them off. How CVS was able to do it under the same conditions, I don't understand. Like I said, I tell people that I'll compete with anybody on a level playing field. I don't care. I think my pharmacies, and I didn't mention this before, and I apologize for that when I was introducing myself. Spartan Nash, in case you don't know, we own Family Fare, we own D&W, we own VG's out east here in Michigan, and we own Forest Hills in East Grand Rapids. So those are the pharmacies that we're all under the same company. We have other companies all the way across the upper Midwest to South Dakota. Banners out there, Family Fresh, Econo Foods, and Family Fare is now spreading out there as well. So any of my stores, I will put up against anybody, Meijer, Walgreens, CVS. The service that we offer, I think, is better, and I don't want to make this a commercial. But when you have to compete with a company that makes most of their money from somebody that's setting your prices, I have a tough time with. I just don't find that to be fair. I'm hopeful the FTC is going to do something about it. They're actually looking into it right now. So hopefully something will happen that'll make things better. When you get the government involved, you never know if it's going to be better or not. So you always got to be careful what you wish for. But I will tell you, we lost before COVID. And I say that because the COVID vaccine, pharmacies administered millions of doses, and our teams did a great job. So I'm very proud of the work that they are continuing to do. But we got it for free. We got paid a fair administration fee for it. And so a lot of pharmacies were able to stay profitable because of that. And so these last 2 years, financially, it really helped that. Prior to that, we were losing about 1,000 to 2,000 independent pharmacies every year. And that's not good for patient access. I remember my patients when I was a pharmacy behind a counter, I knew them. I knew their families. I knew what their issues were. I knew if they were financially able to pay for a drug or not. And if they couldn't, we try to find some way around it. When you have to switch from one pharmacy to another, you're still going to get good care. It's just not the same. And that's why I'm passionate about this. I spent 9 years in the same pharmacy where I knew kids before they were born because their pregnant mom came in and I dealt with them. So it's excuse me. Yes, it's personal for me.
And this may or may not be the appropriate time, but I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
I'm a retired Navy captain. I'm active in Military Officers Association. They just put out a big flash that, and I believe it's Walmart and 8,000 pharmacies will no longer take Tricare effective November 1st. What am I saying am I saying something to you that you can answer back and explain who was the guy? He used to have the rest of the story.
Yep. Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I told you I'm old. That decision was made by Tricare. They wanted to reduce the number of pharmacies in their network. I will tell you that I've got part of my, it depended how you were contracted with their PBM, if it was the direct contract or if it was through what's called a PSAO, it's a company that contracts for you. However you were set up, you either could or couldn't take it. And so Walmart's was a direct account, and so they're not able to take that, the Tricare, which is unfortunate because, like I said, you lose your pharmacist. I mean, people don't change pharmacies. I mean, they change about as often as they change physicians. It's not that often unless you're forced to. And Tricare made that decision. It was purely because they could get a better rate from reducing the number of pharmacies. If all of a sudden, if I'm assured of getting more patients, I'm willing to take a little bit less. That's just business. And so that's what they did. Now, they didn't give us a choice. They just came out and said, this is what it's going to be. You're in, you're out. And that was it. So I've got about 25% of my pharmacies that can't take Tricare, and then the other 75 can. So I'm assuming that's what it was. I'm sure it's a financial decision. But when you look at the market, I heard I won't repeat that. Never mind. I don't know it for a fact, so I'd hate to especially be recording me. So I'll try to stick to stuff that I can prove. Oh my gosh, this is what happens when I get into the subject. I just get so passionate about it that I just lose track of everything. I talked about the claims, talked about the good job that PBMs do is really in the management of the eligibility. That's something they've got all the infrastructure to do that. It's not something that I can do very easily with our computers. And so there is a place for them. It's in all the other stuff that they do that really drives me nuts. Gosh, I went faster than I thought. Okay. All right. As I mentioned, the rebates are where the big profits are for the PBMs. I mean, today, and I can give you these numbers because they don't tell you anything really about our business, but my average price for a branded prescription, the sale price today is over $600 for a brand name prescription. That's average. So that means people are paying a lot more for some of them, and they're paying a little less than for others. So on brand name prescriptions, it's $600. For a generic prescription, my average is $20. 88% of all the prescriptions I fill are generic. About 10 to 11% of the prescriptions I fill are brand name. So when you have that high a number, that brings my average prescription cost to over $80. And all because of all the brands involved in that. I can tell you, and again, it's 1 week, so it's not telling you a lot about my business. During 1 week, we'll do over $4 million worth of sales in brand name prescriptions. It's not unusual for us to lose money on those brand name prescriptions. I've made up to $16,000 1 week, and I thought, wow, that's good, because it's better than losing. But that's the negotiated rate that we like I said, we have to accept. You can't really negotiate with PBMs. They put the price out there. If you want to be in the network, great. Here's your price. You don't want to take it? Fine. We'll let Walmart do it. We'll let Meyer, Kroger, these other companies. Somebody else will take it. Again, because we're just not that smart. You would think that we would stand together, but then you try to stand together and you're accused of collusion. And so you can't do that. But our company looks at the pharmacy customer. Number one, they're the most loyal customer in the store. So we want to keep those customers coming to the pharmacy. Within our four walls, half the people that shop our store, they don't know we have a pharmacy, because you're accustomed to shopping wherever you normally go for your prescriptions, which is usually a drugstore for the most part. They've got the biggest share of the market. So we've got that going against us. But if I get them into the pharmacy, and I can tell you a little bit of my Kroger background, I was in Memphis. I had the state of Arkansas, and I had Walmart. I mean, we're in their backyard, and they would open up a superstore across from one of our Kroger stores. every department in the store would lose 50% of their business because they opened their doors and customers now had another place to go. The pharmacy, we didn't lose anything because customers they would come to us, they'd go shop for their groceries there, but they still wanted to use our pharmacy. And the stores that had the strongest pharmacy operation bounced back quicker. So that's the value of the pharmacy customer to us. So that's why we're very aggressive in trying to, maintain our customers and not let, the business of pharmacy get in the way. I don't say we'll ever operate as a loss leader because that's not a good thing. But when pharmacies first went into supermarkets, they were loss leaders. I don't want to go back to that again. That was back in the early 80s when I remember seeing some in Dallas. HEB and actually King Soopers were the two companies that put pharmacies in their stores back in the 50s. But then it was a long time until you started seeing. Matter of fact, I had customers that would come up to me when I would fill in. I worked in a drugstore, but I would fill in sometimes at the supermarket. They'd come to me and say, "Were you not good enough to work in a drugstore?" We're the same. I work in a drugstore, but that was the mentality. And so it was new. People just didn't know, what we were doing there. Now we're one of the largest departments in the store. Probably $1 out of $6 that gets spent in our store is spent at the pharmacy. Now, part of that is the pricing. I'll grant you that, but it's a big part of our business. We can't afford to lose much, and we certainly can't continue to make less and less profit every year. Our department makes a third of the profit we used to make, because the one thing that I didn't bring up yet, and is that on the slide or the other one? Okay. There was a loophole in, I call it a loophole. There was a provision in the Affordable Care Act that allowed PBMs, because remember that administration wanted everybody to be on a single pay system. They wanted everybody on Medicare. They didn't want all these different commercial plans out there. That's what their goal was. Now, it was a stated goal, so that's out there in the public. There was a provision in there that said, "Hey, look, if you operate a PBM, you can take money away from the pharmacy payment that you're going to pay them, and use it to pay for two things. Use it to promote your plan so we can get more people on this Medicare plan, on the single pay plan, and reduce your premium." So basically, pharmacy would subsidize the plans that they were selling. The other piece is that you would pay the pharmacist for what's called MTM services, and those are clinical services. So nowadays, you go to a pharmacist and they'll review your medications. Your plan has to tell us to do that. So they'll say, "Hey, this patient, they need some help because they're not adhering to their medication or whatever. So if you do these clinical activities, we'll pay you for that." Now, it's money that we gave you, and they're giving some of it back. But as I mentioned, these are the same people that know when you're going to die and how much to charge you for life insurance. And so they know where you're going to land. And so where they put our metrics to hit in order to get our money back that we paid into them is unreachable. So we'll get a portion back. And we work really hard. I've invested in clinical pharmacists in my corporate office. I've got 6 that work, and that's all they do all day long, is that they help patients to try to take the medication better. So you get healthier if you take your medication the right way, believe it or not. And that does increase the number of sales for us, because if you take your prescription every month, then you don't skip 2 or 3 months, then I do get those extra sales. But the goal is that, hey, can we raise our pharmacy star ratings, which is how they end up giving us the money back that they took from us. Those are called DIR fees. They're direct and indirect remuneration fees. And they take that money after the fact. So I get paid for a prescription. 6 months later, they take money back from me. So I don't know how I'm supposed to operate my business when I don't know exactly what I'm making. So now once you cycle, you say, okay, here's where I am. So over time, that's whittled our department's profits to about 1/3 of what they used to be. And you talk about, also as part of Spartan Nash, we run a buying group. So I've got 120 independently owned and operated pharmacies that are part of our buying. We aggregate their purchases with our corporate purchases, and then we present ourselves to a wholesaler as 200 stores. And with that, we get the benefit of volume and discounted prices. So we help them get a better price of product so that, I mean, I grew up in a family-run drugstore. I want to see the independents succeed. I want them to do well. And they're telling us the same thing. It's becoming, they don't know how much longer a lot of them can last because of how egregious these plans are. And so, like I said, I was going to blow your mind away. If you haven't been confused already by the way the pharmacy operates and tries to, I mean, we are a business. So you try to make a profit, profit in my world is not a bad word. We may not make much of it, but it's not a bad word to go out and try to make a profit to pay people, because every year you want to pay them more. Every year my profits go down. And the two of those things don't match really well. So I didn't come in here to complain. I'm sorry. But that's my world. I'm very passionate about it because I've got a daughter that's a pharmacist. I'd like to see that, she has a career to go forward, and she's doing very well. Now she's fortunate. She's in an area of the business. She's in a clinic inside a physician group, and so she's not impacted by these fees. And so she's smart. She's got a good career ahead of her. She's very sharp. But this is a profession that I believe a lot in. I think the kids today getting licensed in pharmacy, they're trained more on the clinical side than I was. I was not told to look at the whole patient. I was told, hey, this is the medication, this is what it does. That's how you counsel the patient. It's not to say that I wouldn't, had I known that they had this other ailment, that I wouldn't have thought about it. But now they train you in hey, you look at the whole patient, what else is going on in the world. And so when they're doing the counseling today, a much better job than I do. I don't consider myself an active pharmacist anymore. Matter of fact, my license is inactive because I don't practice in those states anymore. But the goal of trying to make, at least allow the pharmacist to practice the way they would if they own their own pharmacy, that's what we try to do. And the only way I can do that is if I can show that we can have a valuable business going forward. And I think I've lasted 16 years with Spartan National. I think they think I'm doing okay. They would probably say something different. But any other questions? Go ahead.
So more recently, since COVID and everything, pharmacies are doing way more vaccinations, and the doctor will say, no, I can't give you that shot. You have to go to the pharmacy for that. What's been the reason for that happening?
The primary reason is the access to the vaccine. We're part of what's called the FPP group with the administration. It's the Federal Partnership or Pharmacy Partnership, I believe it's called. And what they did is you get identified first. So you get the vaccine first, and it makes sense to me, because I mean, maybe a little bit biased there, but instead of making the patient go to a physician's office between these hours, you've got a retail location that's open, 7 days a week.
Many more hours, yes.
Yeah, and so that you can just walk in and get it there. So the access to the vaccine is much easier for us to get right now than it is physicians. Over time, they'll get it. In January, we start paying for that vaccine. I don't know what the price is going to be yet, but so that'll change. But yeah, no, we're giving, I mean, where we used to give in a year 40,000 vaccines, we gave almost 200,000 last year. And it's, I mean, pharmacy is the place to go and get, and it's not the only vaccines we do.
Nothing wrong with it. I just wondered what caused. So does that help you get more money then by having to give up the vaccine? I
mean, our goal is to do more clinical things because, as I mentioned, the profit on the filling pills and selling them is dropping. So I've got to have my pharmacists, and I try to get them to work at the top of their license so that they can actually implement what they learned in school, and they're getting taught to do this. Now, what we need, to be honest, is we need to be given provider status so that you can bill without saying, okay, no, this has to go through your physician or through the hospital. And if a pharmacist gets physician status, gets provider status, I don't want to be a physician, believe me. But if I get provider status, then I could be like some of these nurse practitioners and see patients all the time. I've got machines that can fill prescriptions just as accurately as my people. Now, they can't answer your questions. They can't be there able to you the way, well, that's a lie. They can't do everything that my people do. And we've got great people that are, committed to making a person's life better, our patients' lives better. And so the machine won't do that, but they can fill prescriptions. I mean, they're very accurate. They've got optical imagers now where you can just pour pills on this tray, one of these old overhead projectors. I know this group will know what an overhead projector was. Other groups don't know so much. But you pour them on there and it instantly counts it for you. So the technology is there and it identifies it too. That's the right pill when you pour it on there. So I've got, robots that can do a lot of the stuff that our pharmacists are doing right now. And if I can move them over to help patients take a more serious look sometimes at their illnesses, which, nobody likes to manage their disease. You don't like taking pills because of how it makes you feel, or just having to take the time to remember to take it. They don't like that. But just by getting them to understand the importance, hey, this is what will happen if you don't. The diabetics is the easiest one. I've got a program where I send a clinical pharmacist to a local employer and they manage all their diabetic patients. And what you see is their A1C is the metric. That's what you look at. If you get below 7, then you've got them at least in better, there's less chance of complications down the road, like the neuropathy, the amputations, the kidney failure and blindness, those types of things.
Also, I was going to ask about over the past, like 10 years, maybe that, before we never used to see medications advertised and commercials for them on TV.
Yeah.
And now, and yet, if you ask your doctor about any of those medications that are on TV, they are your top brand and they cost a lot of money.
Yes.
And it's like, I feel like.
You're hitting all my buttons.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
That's okay.
But I mean, it seems like before we used to have, be able to get, we relied on our doctor to give us the medication that they thought was right for us. Okay, now I'm sure there's people going into doctors and saying, hey, I want that one that, that was on TV where they,
Yeah, it's called direct to consumer advertising. It's a huge business because it's followed up with not only that, but then they go in and they see the doctors, their reps do. And they're no longer promoting last year's drug, I'll call it, because it's no longer the one that they're going to promote. They're promoting this. And they are very successful. You have patients coming to the doctor saying, this is the pill I want.
this is the pill, this is the doctor, this is the medication I want because the TV showed me what this cool stuff it's going to do for me.
Yeah. That lady that holds the little mask up with a smiley face, suffers from depression, and everybody's seen that, but I had never seen the market shift so quickly, which is why they do it. You've got all these tried and true drugs that we've had for years. All of a sudden, the new one comes out, and it won't do that great unless they do direct to consumer advertising, because you got to take business from other medications. And because your copay is going to be the same, whether you buy the old one or the new one, the patient wants the new one. I don't blame them.
But many times the medication like that I'll ask for, doctor will say, well, your insurance isn't going to pay for that.
Yeah.
So as soon as I hear that, then I go, well, then what will it pay for?
Yeah, that's that formulary management button you're pressing now. But yeah.
You also have to realize, though, that patients walk in, they've seen it on TV, they think they have that disease. They come in demanding that drug.
Yeah.
And you're saying, ma'am, you don't have that disease. You don't need that drug. And they are very despondent. They'll go to another doctor.
Yeah.
I want that drug, whether they have the disease or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We had dinner with some people the other day, and this lady says, I have this thing going on, and they gave me this medicine one time was $8,000. Okay, I take different ones for different things. How important is it for the individual person to care, to know what it actually costs? Because when you hear numbers like that, it's so mind-boggling. It's like, yeah, but what can I do about it?
Yeah. as I mentioned earlier, I think that the worst thing that happened to us was creating this copay card system where you're only going to pay your portion of it, and that portion doesn't go up very often, because you don't get to see what the cost of the medication is. And then on the manufacturer side, the drug Harvoni, it was for cirrhosis of the liver, I think, but it was a cure, and it was like $12,000. I can't remember if it was per month or per dose, but whatever it was. I mean, it was a huge amount. The rebate on that drug was over $8,000 to the PBM. So the cost is huge. What the net cost is to the plan, I can't tell you without knowing more information, but there is absolutely no transparency that would tell you. So, you know, the manufacturer, you figure that you've got 17 years, and that's from when it was discovered, not from when it was marketed. So you had 17 years to get your research and development back, and also pay for whatever. And I'm not an apologist for the pharma, because believe me, I think they make a ton of money, but they do have to pay for research and development of products that never made it. You know, and there's some that they work on, and they find, oh, wait a minute, it works for this instead of that. You know, the Rogaine, it was a medication that they were giving for blood pressure, and it turns out it grew hair. Go ahead.
How important is it for me, the individual consumer, to really know or care?
Well, I think the caring I can't do anything about, but the knowing I think is very important. I think when you're going to go to the ballot box and you're gonna vote on some kind of policy that or law that's going to do something, I think it's important to know all the aspects of what's going on. You know, if you don't know that PBMs take X amount of dollars, that the manufacturers, you know, pay for a lot of these rebates, you maybe can't formulate maybe what the best decision would be long term for some of those policies. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. But I mean, so for people to know, I think you make better decisions.
I think the physician has an obligation to explain to you why this medicine is important for you.
Yeah.
You know, for example, well, there's many things we could look at for that cost.
Yeah.
And much of that is legislative.
Yeah.
And we have to, you know, that's what
I'll put it to you this way. What's the cost of you not taking it? Because if you don't take it, then are you gonna have to go to the emergency room? Are you gonna have to go spend time in the hospital? Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Yeah.
Give you an example. I have a disease called pulmonary fibrosis, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. I've inherited it. I've used the people at Vanderbilt for their expertise. There are several great new drugs out. They don't provide any clinical benefit to the patient. They just sometimes prevent the disease from progressing. And as the people at Vanderbilt said, you don't need to spend $12,000 a month for this drug because you're not clinically getting worse. And this is what's important, I think, for the physician to talk to the patients about why we're giving you this medicine. In my business, let's take this, you know, if the insurance company wants you to take naproxen for your rheumatoid arthritis. Well, naproxen does not stop the disease. Methotrexate may stop the disease, but the pharmacy, the insurance company has decided in their step therapy that you have to go through these steps. And I can tell you, having been on the phone begging, and the pharmacist is not involved in this. This is beyond them. you have to deal with the insurance company. And their basic problem is they want to make profit for their stockholders. So they're not really interested in you and I as people in our health. They're interested in making a profit. Now, as Ed said, there's nothing wrong with making a profit. That's the American way. But sometimes the profit motive outweighs anything else.
To go back to the cost, there's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to comment on the same thing. So I think there's lots of reasons why we should all be concerned about the cost. Some of them impact you very directly at the time you're getting your drug, depending on the plan that you're in. If you're in a high deductible health plan and your deductible is $3,000 and you get prescribed an $8,000 drug, then you're going to have to pay $3,000 for it if you haven't met your deductible. So there's some practical, immediate reasons to care. Same thing in Medicare, you'll hit the donut hole earlier if you are taking really expensive drugs, and then your out-of-pocket costs go up. So for those reasons, very directly, we should all care, what the costs of some of these drugs are, whether they're clinically relevant or not. And there's an awful lot of them that aren't clinically relevant that are still really expensive. But the other thing is that our healthcare costs, whether you're in a commercial plan or a Medicare plan, go up according to how, the rate of increase in the cost of healthcare. So every time there's a new $8,000 drug that a lot of people are taking, those costs are distributed out among all of us, because that's how insurance works, right? You spread it out among everybody. So the rate of my plan the next year may be, 10% higher instead of 6% higher if people weren't taking that $8,000 drug. So these things, even if you're not taking the drug, it still impacts you because of the impact on the total cost of healthcare, or to you personally, depending on the plan that you're in terms of your copay.
Let me make one comment,
Sure.
Eddie. About the bill that Biden signed recently, to reduce cost of drugs. You've got to read that. You find out that it's going to uncover, it takes like 5 years for it to go through, and it's only going to cover about 10 drugs. It's worthless. This whole thing is with politicians. And I'm sorry to say that this law isn't going to help us that much to start with. And I think we got probably hydrochlorothiazide will be one. Maybe it'll go from 10 cents a pill to 6 cents a pill, but it really isn't going to save us that much money. But it does allow Medicare to negotiate, but the number of drugs they can negotiate on is so small.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they can't negotiate much with them, because I'll bring something up that maybe none of you know about, but 340B pricing. Hospitals are able to buy medications at about 10% of what I can buy them at. Okay. So they will contract with pharmacies and say, okay, any of the prescriptions that any doctor that's affiliated with us or that works for us, any patients that see them and take their prescriptions to you. Now, it doesn't impact the patient whatsoever, but we'll sign a contract with the hospital, and any of those prescriptions, all the money I collect from that, I give back to the hospital, less a fee. So we keep, I'll just make up a number, but I'll keep $20 of that prescription. So the hospital takes that money, they reimburse me or they replace the drug for me. So I paid $200 for the medication. They pay $20. They give me the medication back. So I'm whole. Okay, I've got my medication. I get paid $20 for the fee that basically for filling the prescription, that action itself. The hospital keeps that difference. So the difference between what they paid for the medication and the money that I gave them, so call it $180. They keep that, and they're supposed to use that to pay for the indigent care. If the manufacturer wants to be on the Medicare or Medicaid formularies, they have to participate in 340B. So it's another piece that you see it, you don't know it. And over time, it used to be a hospital can only contract with one pharmacy. Now they can contract with as many as they want. And many of them are out there actively looking. I didn't used to do 340 business, 7, 8 years ago. And then I've got hospitals calling me saying, hey, I need you to do this and, sign up with it. And so we did, thinking I'm helping them out. And then you look at their bottom line, and they can't function without the money they get off of these 340Bs. At least I don't think so. It doesn't look like it from the money they earn. So that's another reason, that another piece of the puzzle, that as you look at healthcare in total, where the money is going, because it's easy to blame the manufacturer. And believe me, I think they've got a lot of blame that they need to accept. But when you look at what they're required to do, in some cases, pay 40 to 70% rebate to a PBM, allow this 10% on the dollar payment to the hospitals. They obviously they're making a profit too, and they make a ton. But again, all these buttons you guys keep pressing, the direct to consumer advertising, it's absolutely ridiculous that a company would pay millions of dollars. And then I'm finding out that they're recouping that with the sales. And so I'm thinking, maybe there's more blame there than I give them. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I have a comment and a question. The
Sure.
comment first is that when my mother had a terminal illness about 10 years ago, the DNW Spartan Nash pharmacist was outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
Just in every step of
That
the way.
here in Holland?
This was in East Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just,
I appreciate you saying.
yeah, just phenomenal. The question just is, this is incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
And do other countries, or maybe you don't know broadly, but do they do it better, simpler? or-
Everybody talks about how much cheaper drugs are in other companies. And it's true for the brands. Generics, no. You couldn't afford generics in Canada if you went up there and bought them compared to what we sell them for here. But what happens is you don't have all that government intervention. You don't have PBMs like we have here. They do have one, and most of them is one healthcare provider basically that you have to, which everybody's going to have their own opinion. I can't see waiting 6 months to get my appendix out if I had to have it. But so national healthcare is that, but the manufacturers don't have to pay those rebates. They don't have to do the 340B pricing. So the price is going to be cheaper.
The manufacturer still makes the same percentage profit.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just that there is no middleman.
Yeah.
Eddie, I want to thank you very much.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I'm very passionate. I could go on forever, and you probably more than what you want to know.
He answered a lot of my questions, and I hope he answered your questions. Pharmacy benefit managers are the bane of our existence.
To mine.
He is. And I know from being, the patient comes back to me and says, Doc, I can't afford that pill you gave me. I know what it's about because I have to figure out what to do for the patient. And it becomes very difficult at times to balance that versus this.
Yeah, in the news, a more quick comment. In the news, you're probably going to hear more about PBM reform. That's what it's about.
Yes, it is.
It's the transparency that it's just, it's not there, and the unfair competitive practices are what we're fighting right now. And so if you hear about it, just think about it.
They've crept in under the radar, and it really taken over a lot of things. So this man knows about it. He's dealing with them directly. His livelihood is there. So we want to thank him for coming and talking.
I appreciate the invitation. I enjoyed it.
I hope you learned something. And thank you, Ed. Appreciate it, sir.
Appreciate the invitation.
And for those of you who are on Zoom, we haven't had any questions come in through Zoom, but for those of you who are on Zoom, we hope you enjoyed this. Those of you who came here, we hope you enjoyed it. The coffee is fresh out there. And thank you very much from those of us at HASP.